go. So here he is, Mr. Pat Divilly is in the house. So how are things with yourself, my friend?
I'm good. I'm busy but good. So I've got a blend of a couple of weeks of just going crazy doing talks all around the country and coaching and stuff back home, and then I tend to dip off to the foreign lands to climb mountains or decompress or whatever. So I'm working at the moment for once.
Well, it's good the fact that you've just literally come straight off a stage and you've jumped on the podcast with us. So, yeah. So, anyway, the big thing here, what I want to get out of you is I've been following your content for so long, and obviously knowing you on a personal level, is your actual story. So, with you, Pat, how did all of this start?
Yeah, it's funny because public speaking is one of my main things now. It was the scariest thing in the world to me a couple of years ago. Like, I wouldn't go to school if there was a presentation. I wouldn't go to college if there was a presentation. I'd avoid it at all costs. And I got offered the opportunity a couple of years ago to speak. And so I would just tell my story, and that became like a comfort blanket. So for a year or two, I told the story anywhere that they'd listen. And then I stopped telling the story, so I don't really tell it anymore. But I suppose for the purpose of people that wouldn't have heard it, it's probably good to give a bit of context. Basically, I always wanted to do fitness from the time I was early teens. It was the first thing that kind of gave me confidence. I did martial arts and lifted weights growing up. All I ever wanted to do was be a fitness guy. And obviously, it's blown up over the last couple of years. But before then, you could get a job in fitness, but maybe not a career. So it was a bit far-fetched, I suppose. Long story short, to a certain degree, I lived in England for a while. I did a master's in nutrition out there. Then I came out of college at the worst of the recession and set up a little business in Dublin. I worked in a few commercial gyms first and then got fired for being very blunt about what I thought about certain things. But I went out on my own, and I moved to Dublin, obviously the capital of Ireland, from Galway, which would be a bit smaller. And I had this kind of, looking back, I lacked self-esteem, and I always felt that if I did things outside of myself, and if people thought that I was cool, then eventually I'd believe it. So I did so much things for external validation. I lived in Dublin for a year and a half, really struggling to get a business off the ground. I didn't want to come home with my tail between my legs because I wanted to be the success story from the small town that did well in the big city. I trained all the models in Dublin. I used to train them for free with the hope that they'd get me into the newspapers. And so you can imagine my friends back in Ireland are thinking, geez, he never comes home. Or my friends back in Galway, he never comes home. He's training models. And I was painting this picture on social media of how well things were going. And ultimately, Christmas Eve came, 2011. My dad rang me up, said, when are you coming home for Christmas? And I broke down on the phone and just said, look, I haven't been doing as well as I've let on. I'm going to have to borrow the €15 for the bus home. And I just cried for 3 hours on a bus journey home, feeling like a failure. Again, I was an insecure young man that had failed miserably. And because I'd put it out there so much on social media, I guess a lot of people were seeing me fail. And I moved back in with my parents at 24. Subsequently, people have kind of said to me, that's not a big deal. It's lots of people have been in that position. But for some reason, I think I wanted to achieve, and I just felt like a real failure. So moved back in with them. I got work in a pizza shop back in Galway. I'm meeting people every day for 6 months that I'd grown up with, kind of saying, geez, Pat. So it was a kick in the teeth every day. But ultimately, I contacted some trainers in the UK, and I said, look, you seem to be doing really well. Could you give me some advice? And Mark Tregilgas, who we know from Cardiff, a successful trainer out there, called me up, and he didn't really tell me anything I didn't know. He just gave me a bit of belief that I didn't have. And he said, hey, go start teaching an outdoor fitness class. There's no overheads. You can do this. He just gave me a bit of energy. And for a guy that had no belief at the time, that little nudge gave me a lot. And so I started a small fitness class on the local beach. I had 5 clients my first morning. And I just said, look, if I'm the best part of these people's day every day, the thing will grow. When I lived in Dublin, it was all about...
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, a simple business plan, but I mean, it works, regardless of what you do. If you're the best part of someone's day, how can it not become something? When I'd been in Dublin, I cared too much about myself. I cared about who I trained and my ego and getting to a certain level, all this kind of stuff. Now, having gone through struggle, I suppose, and gone through depression and everything else, I kind of recognized everyone's got stuff going on. If I'm just a good part of people's day, it'll become something. And 3 months in, I had 100 people. on the beach. A year in, I opened a gym, brought out a book, and long story short, 5 years on, 20-something thousand clients went through online courses. We raised $250,000 for charity. We built a school in Nepal. Did 3 best-selling books, opened my gym, which was the dream, sold the gym when it wasn't the dream anymore. And more than any of that stuff, that's what people would see, I suppose. But what I'm proud of is just who I became along the way, and the confidence that I built, and the sort of the self-esteem of not needing. I suppose I got everything I thought I ever wanted, and then there was times where I still didn't feel the happiness or the confidence. So I really had to go the long way around to figure out, and I'm still figuring lots out. But I'm proud of who I've become, I suppose, and that's what I try to share with people now.
That's absolutely incredible, Pat. So from that then, what would you say was the penny drop moment for you? Was there a penny drop moment of change where through that it just was like the light bulb came on?
I like to think I'm a new person every 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and that's across the board in terms of how I think, in terms of how I live. So there's been loads. I think when I started the business, everything was amazing to me. To have my first 5 clients blew me away. To get my name in the local newspaper blew me away. And then I started getting TV and radio and different things in Ireland. And suddenly, I don't know, I lost the novelty, and I was just kind of on a treadmill. Like, we can become a victim of a certain level of success in anything. And I was just saying yes to everything. I didn't want to become insignificant. And so I was just running the thing. And a couple of years in, I kind of pressed pause, and I said, wait a second, this is not what I started. It's kind of gotten away from me. And that was a light bulb moment of slowing down, recognizing you don't have to say yes to everything, recognizing that what you start, it changes over time. You've got to stop every now and then. And it's kind of like, I use the analogy of, if you go to college to do, I don't know, psychology, and you're 3 years in, and it's not what you thought it was going to be, but you feel like, I've invested 3 years, so I better stick with it. And then you go into the work world, and suddenly it's been 6 years, and you could spend the rest of your life stuck in something that's not right for you. And unfortunately, as difficult as it is, you have to be willing to be wrong sometimes. And I'm wrong a lot, thankfully. So having a gym was a dream for me, but then I recognized this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so walking away from fitness was a massive challenge for me. The fear of going back to being insignificant, or being broke, or being lost, and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think there's constant light bulb moments, but it's really about slowing down, being honest with yourself, and just recognizing. I always joke with people that sometimes we're giving other people advice, and as we're saying the words, we're thinking, Jesus, there's some good stuff in here. And we've got a great voice inside of us that has the answers, but oftentimes we either project onto other people, and we value their opinion more than our own, or we are obsessed with being busy and being distracted rather than actually listening to that voice. So I always encourage people to slow it down, ask yourself the question, what's one thing I could change in my life right now that would have a positive impact? And I've no doubt in my mind people have the answer to that,
So when you decided to change then, because obviously there was, from that story, you've obviously changed quite a lot, or it sounds like you broke yourself down in order to rebuild yourself up.
Yeah.
What was the method, or what was the tool you used in order to kind of get that process? Like, how did you actually get your own clarity on that?
Yeah, I think myself and yourself have kind of been through similar transitions, and I think we've talked about it in the sense that I had a phase of a couple of years where I wanted to consume as much information as I could. So read every book going. I'd put on audiobooks at double speed so I could take them in faster. I'd do courses. I was always looking outside, and I learned a huge amount, and it helped me to become a good trainer. It helped me to become a good coach. But there was a bit of a change in when someone told me, that the other books are never going to tell you about your own life. You need to start getting pen and paper, and you need to start looking at your own life, and maybe take the other people off the pedestals. So there was a period a couple of years ago, I actually went out to Necker Island, and I was out with Branson, who's one of my heroes, Richard Branson. Got to go out there, and it looked really cool on Facebook. And at that point, I'd raised $250,000 for charity, opened a gym. I'd done all the things that I wanted to do. But when I got there, I felt this sense of imposter syndrome. I felt like, who am I to be here? I'm looking around me. I'm overwhelmed. I didn't feel good. Again, the pictures on Facebook look great. But I think when I came back from that trip, it was kind of right. I need to do more self-reflection. I need to, rather than always looking out for the answers, I need to kind of slow it down. And it was simply, pen and paper. When I worked in the pizza place a couple of years ago, I took pen and paper and I wrote down what a perfect day would look like. I wrote down 100 goals.
Was it on a receipt or a pizza box?
Yeah, probably. But I did all that, and I achieved, the things that were on the list. And then again, you can kind of, it's funny, sometimes things work really well in life and then you just forget about them and you go to try and find more complex things. So after that, I started doing self-reflection. Why do I get imposter syndrome around certain people? What's my inadequacies? Why do I feel inferior? Why do I feel intimidated? What would make me feel more comfortable? And I just, I made some big changes. Quit alcohol for a year was one thing to deal with social anxiety more and get through that. Journaling became a daily practice. Wim Hof breathing became a regular thing. Just taking different tools. But the biggest thing is I always tell people, most of us look outside of ourselves and we're obsessed by the relationships with other people. You have to have some daily practices that are about developing a relationship with yourself. For me, it's journaling and it's breathing. Wim Hof breathing, but for you it could be anything. But when you go from spending your whole life looking outward for the answers to just taking a bit of time, you don't have to sit under a tree for 16 hours a day cross-legged to get the answers, but just it's a process of learning to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and trust the inner voice. I suppose when we're kids we trust that voice all the time, and then it gets beaten out of us a little bit.
What would you say has been for you the most powerfulest tool that you've picked up or learned?
Journaling. It's funny, I was doing that talk earlier today for one of the corporates, and I told them journaling, it's not going to get as much airtime because you can't really sell anything. You can sell a journaling course, but it's not a sexy kind of 10-step program or anything like that. But and people get confused about what journaling is. It doesn't have to look a certain way. To me, it's getting yourself with a pen and paper, turning off your phone, even if it's for 15 minutes, and asking yourself a question. And the analogy I use is that if I want a great relationship with my partner or my father or my friend if I want a great relationship with anyone, I've got to take time for them. I've got to get to know them. Can't just have the same conversation all the time. And I've got to be present and fully engaged. And then we all want happiness and confidence. Happiness and confidence are a reflection of your relationship with yourself. So then it comes down to how often do you take time for yourself? How often do you get to know yourself? And that's question your beliefs, question your thoughts, lean into fears, and how often you're present with yourself. And when you journal, you get that time for you. You're not connected to technology, and you're questioning something. Like for anyone listening to this, there's a million things you could ask yourself. You're literally asking yourself questions. So you could take pen and paper and say, what would ultimate success look like for me? What am I afraid of and why? What would my perfect day look like? Where am I on a scale of 1 to 10 in my relationships at the moment, and what would 10 out of 10 look like? What are my 3 happiest days in recent memory? There's so many things. What will I miss out on in life if I hold on to my fears? And if you can imagine doing that for 20 minutes a day for a month, you're going to be a different person, because it opens up things you've never considered.
I can stand by that. So me and Pat actually spent some time in Peru where we did Machu Picchu, and I at the time just thought it'd be a trip going up a mountain as you do, and actually through it Pat delivered some insane topics, and you did some journaling workshops through the duration of that climb. And that trip was actually one of the trips that changed. That it literally was one of the biggest moments of clarity I think I've ever had in my own life, where I was like, what am I doing? So it was quite amazing. One of the best questions which you took, where I'd say a penny drop, but it was genuinely like a full bank dropped on me, was the whole one of, if you were to go up to your youngest version of yourself when you were most happiest, grab the hands and then give yourself that one piece of honest advice. It broke me. And I think it was amazing how just from actually asking yourself the questions, you can't hide. Does that make sense? That's
exactly it. The problem with some of the motivational seminars and motivational, all that kind of stuff, motivation is a kind of rah-rah, I'm going to get you psyched up for 20 minutes and then what do you do with your life? And then you're kind of reliant on me. Whereas inspiration is the idea of, it's kind of like mentoring versus coaching. Both have their place, but a mentor is going to tell you step by step, this is how you do whatever it is you want to do. A coach is going to help you come up with your own plan. And we know from the experience in the fitness industry that coaching is really powerful in the sense that If someone's tried every diet plan under the sun, there's no point me throwing another one at them. It will be of more value to interview them and get a feel for, well, why do you think you failed in the past? Okay, how could we maybe prevent that from happening in the future? Because we've all got the answers to our own issues, but we don't give ourselves the time or the space to let them come up, or the trust. Again, I had a lady, I was coaching her last week, and I said, what do you want to work on? She said, well, I want to read all the books on the bookshelf because I buy all these books and I don't read them. And ultimately, that wasn't about the books on the bookshelf. It was about the fact that she didn't believe that she had enough knowledge, that she was experienced enough to excel in her career. And I asked her ultimately, how many books do you have to read for you to actually fill that void? And the reality was there would never be enough books in the world for her to fill that, because that's not the way to fill it, There's other ways, but she had to figure that out by exploring this, And I asked her, do you always assume that the experts that you go to know everything? And she said, no, of course not. This is, well, what are you expecting of yourself? So that's an example of coaching. That's an example of journaling, of self-reflection, of self-awareness, of inspiration, as opposed to, and the flip side of that coin is there's certainly value in mentoring and motivational books and all this kind of stuff. But I would say you got to go between the two. So like you had your transition a couple of years ago away from bodybuilding. You were obviously doing more of that stuff.
Yeah, that was a fun time.
Yeah, it would have been of value to you for X amount of years to have a great coach there, a great mentor, I suppose, in bodybuilding that showed you the way. But as soon as it's not your thing anymore, that mentor doesn't know how to adapt. So you need to go to a coach then and figure out what's the next thing. And maybe it's speaking, and then you go to a mentor, and it's a dance between the two, I think.
I totally agree with that. I think that's it. And I think that's where sometimes the coach and the mentoring will get a bit confused, because people get really upset that the clients are leaving them. And sometimes I'm like, well, if a client's with you forever, then you've not done your job. So they just take what they need, don't they? And then move on from that.
Dax had a good, Dax Moy was a great coach. He had an analogy a couple of years ago. I think he used to say a mentor is a bit like a bus driver. So you get on the bus and you say you're going to Manchester, and the bus drivers pick the route. So you just get on and you go with it. Whereas a coach is more like a taxi driver. So you tell them where you're trying to go, but you can kind of call the shots to a certain degree, and you can make up the route. So obviously there's a bit more empowerment in the second one, but again, both have their place. So it's just knowing that line. You shouldn't spend your whole life looking to other people for the answers. You should ask yourself the questions, the important questions. What does success look like to you? What 3 things would you like to achieve in the next 3 months? What is your definition of happiness? What would give you confidence? And once you have those answers, then you can go and get the right person to help speed up the journey, I guess.
I love that. I love the fact you've just mentioned as well about the whole success thing. We were just speaking at an event the other day, and it was quite impactful. We asked them, what do they perceive their success as? And it was amazing how many of them were going after material, they were chasing the wrong things.
Yeah.
Do you see that quite a lot in your stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. I just put an Instagram video up before we went live, and it was about most rooms you walk into, if you were to ask the question, who wants to be successful, every hand in the room will go up. And if you followed up with, what does success look like to you, there wouldn't be too many in the room that would be able to rhyme off an answer. And then you'd probably get answers that were just a reflection of society and what societal norms are. And that's not to say, material things can't be something to chase. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I think it's just recognizing that if you're not happy in yourself, the material things won't make you happy. If you become happy in yourself, then the material things can be great, and they can kind of add to your life maybe a little bit, but it's an inner game. So it starts from the inside out. I think ultimately the best definition of success I've got is that you're moving from point A to point B. Point A is an honest reflection of where you are. Point B is an honest reflection of where you'd like to go. And it's a meaningful journey. So there's a guy called Sean Anker who does happiness research. And the way he put it, he kind of said a lot of people associate happiness with pleasure. So they think that, think about eating a cake or drinking a pint. That can give you pleasure, but it's not ultimately going to give you long-term happiness. Now, on the flip side, if you think about running a marathon, that's something that you can have pleasure in even when it's tough, because you're working towards something meaningful. So his definition of happiness is always that the happiest people have got something in life, a purpose, they've got meaning. Doesn't mean it's always easy, Doesn't mean it's always pleasurable, but it's always meaningful, I guess. You see this when people have kids, it changes how they live. They're not as in their own heads anymore. They get out of their own way. They do what they have to do. They've got something to live for more than themselves. You see it in marathons. You go to a marathon, 99% of the people there are wearing a charity name on their top because it's about something more than themselves. So oftentimes, success comes down to, it's all about meaning and purpose, I think. And it's not a destination. Because as soon as you buy the house, as soon as you get the car, as soon as you get the 100,000 followers, you recognize that it was just a tick the box, and life continues. So it's always got to be.
Don't feel any different.
No, I don't know that I've done anything, that's really. I remember doing the Late Late Show here in Ireland, which is the big TV show, and that was my big goal for 5 years because it meant that I had done something with my life. If you get on that show, you've achieved something. And I went backstage afterwards, and I just looked in the mirror and I says, "Wow, I don't feel any different," and that was why I would encourage people listening. I'm probably going off on tangents here, but the way I used to live was, I'll be happy when fill in the blank. So I'll be happy when I get the house, I'll be happy when I get the car, I'll be happy when I meet the partner, whatever it is. That's putting your happiness into the future, and it's a moment in time, versus what are 2 to 3 things that make you happy now, and can you do them every day? And then watch what happens in your life. Like, that's been the biggest transformation for me the last couple of years. I do jiu-jitsu every day, I breathe every day, I ride every day, catch up with people that are close to me, and I only do work that I like. I don't really have goals the same way I used to have goals. I don't have a to-do list anymore. I just have daily activities.
An excitement list.
yeah, it's probably a good way of putting it, and it's also a confidence tracker, in the sense that, another exercise we get people doing, which kind of ties in, but it's what are the things that make you confident? So, okay, I feel confident when I drink 3 liters of water, feel confident when I get up a little bit earlier, make that list, and then make a spreadsheet and tick off every day which of the things you did, and watch how, if you have a bad day or a bad week, maybe it's because nothing on the list happened, and the busy stuff, the emails, the social media, the Netflix, all got in the way. I would list 2, 3, 4, 5 things that need to be a priority, to fill you with energy, to fill you with contentment, to give you meaning. If those things happen every day, life's a lot simpler.
Love it, mate. So, jumping back, I want to just take a bit of a rewind. You mentioned at first when you noticed that you got clear on things and you got really self-aware. So essentially, pretty much self-awareness is everything, it's the initial point of change. That as soon as you got that, then you had to deal with the self-imposter syndrome to then actually create that change.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that I've been crippled with in the past, and it's something that when we're mentoring and coaching and speaking with people that I see crop up quite a lot. So how would you define it? How would you break it down? What would be your journey or your guide through that?
Yeah, it's funny with some of these things, because when I talk about them, sometimes I'll probably come off as if I've got it figured out, or and you feel like it sometimes. Like, it could be, I was saying to someone last week, I could speak in front of 10,000 people and feel comfortable, and maybe the next day I'm down the post office and I bump into someone and I feel socially anxious. So I think there's layers to it, and I think sometimes speakers and coaches do a disservice by kind of making out as if they've got everything together, because we're all figuring it out. But one of the big things I think is we've all got an identity, and the identity is how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves fitting into the world. So I used to be the fitness guy, the local success story, the partier on the weekends. I had all these labels that I would put on myself, or they'd either be labels that would actually get used, or just, if I had to think about it, I'd say, yeah, I'm the guy that goes out and drinks a lot of beer on a Saturday night, and then is the fitness guy during the week. And I had that was my identity. And so we've all got an identity. You could be a mother, a father, a non-smoker, a smoker, an employee, an employer, a vegan. These are the, and vegan is a good example, actually. If you think about, a vegan will never eat meat, because part of the vegan's identity is that they don't eat meat. So we do things in line with our identity. A non-smoker won't ever smoke, because why would a non-smoker smoke? So how that applies is that if I'm the party animal and I decide I want to make change, and I decide I'm going to go and, I don't know, get healthy, it's all well and good thinking that I'm just going to buy the book and I'm just going to get a trainer and it's going to be very straightforward. But there's this really powerful force, which is the story that you tell yourself 1,000 times a day, which in that case is I'm the life and soul of the party. If I don't drink alcohol anymore, I might not have my friends around anymore. They're going to make fun of me. There's all this self-doubt that comes up. So I think it's recognizing the stories is important. I think you gotta be willing to give up who you are now. This is why change is so hard. The way you are now in the world fits. It works. Let's say someone's massively overweight and they're really unhealthy, but that's how they're seen within their social circle, and that keeps them safe. That keeps them comfortable. Doesn't mean they're where they want to be, but they're safe and comfortable because what they're currently doing supports their current life. And so if they want to change, it challenges that, because what if I'm not this person anymore? What will it mean in terms of my space in the social hierarchy? What will it mean? You know, you think about jumping around here, but think about public speaking. The reason people are scared of public speaking is the fear of judgment. If I stand up in front of a room and I express myself and people don't agree with me, maybe I'll be exiled and they won't like me anymore. So I think recognizing that as a starting point is important with imposter syndrome. It's normal. I think you're supposed to feel that sometimes. And I would just question, why do you feel that? Okay, I feel that because, you know, I feel like everyone else in the room has got it figured out. The other big thing we need to think about is we always compare our internal to other people's external. So I go to Branson's Island, I'm hanging out with all these millionaires and billionaires, and I'm just seeing millionaires and billionaires. I'm not seeing their insecurities, I'm not seeing their fear, I'm not seeing their broken relationships and all the other stuff that they're dealing with. We always look at the very, what's the word? We get a very selective shot or vision of
the highlight reel.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, you know, even coming back to a different example, I used to go on the TV a couple of years ago, and I had this perception that everyone on TV is a natural, is super confident, has got it all figured out, lives the perfect life, all this kind of stuff. You do it for a while and you realize they're just people, the same way everyone else is just people. So everybody has got insecurities, everyone's got fears, everyone's got self-doubt. I think recognizing that gives yourself a bit of leeway in the imposter syndrome thing. And the last thing maybe to say on the imposter syndrome is you're better off being rejected for who you are than accepted for who you're not. So oftentimes we want everyone to like us, we want to fit in all the time, we want to say the right things. And so we actually say something that's not true to us. We think about what does the other person want to hear, or what does the group want to hear, and we feed into that. And so if we say the right thing, we get accepted, but it's not really us because we're making it up. If we say the wrong thing, we get rejected, but again, it wasn't really us. So I think if you express yourself honestly, that's all you can do. And if you do your best in every situation, that's all you can do. You got to lower your expectations on yourself. That's the hard thing with speaking. When I started speaking, my expectation used to be everybody in the room's got to change their life after this seminar. Everyone's got to like me. Everyone's got to laugh at my jokes. It's not easy.
On that note, I can remember like the first time I did it, I went out to my dad. Dad's been quite a powerful mentor for me personally. And the thing that changed it for me was like, it's impossible to please everyone in that room. and I think you use the analogy of something like, if you were to go into a burning house and save a family, the babies, and the puppy, there'll be someone somewhere in the world will hate you for doing that. It was like you can't impress the room of people that you're trying to speak to, which was kind of a big thing to just let that go, let that fear go.
Yeah, sometimes told on that, and it doesn't just apply to public speaking. Any interaction is, if I go in and I'm trying to win your approval, effectively I'm trying to take from you. I'm trying to take your approval. If I go in and I'm just trying to share whatever it is that I can share, then I'm trying to give you something. And so it takes the pressure off. Anytime we're scared of public speaking, we're scared that we're going to look bad. That's our fear. But if we make it about the people in front of us, that's why service is such an important thing. The other thing to remember, I'm jumping on loads of different things here, but there's certain people, no matter what you do in life, they'll love you. And there's certain people, no matter what you do in life, they won't like you. And that's the reality. You know, that's what it is. It is what it is. If you can accept that, the imposter syndrome is not as severe, I think.
Good. Do you still see that it creeps in from time to time again? Is that still something? Because obviously it's quite hard to just completely quash and crush something, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I think the more aligned you are to your message and to the things you're doing, the less likely it is. So a couple of years ago, I was the fitness guy. I had kind of lost interest in the industry a bit, because I've been around it for so long. I was more interested in personal development. So I found sometimes when I was invited to do fitness events or do influencer work as a fitness person, then I would feel a bit of imposter syndrome because it didn't feel aligned or congruent to the events that I was in. I was around influencers and these kind of people that weren't really my kind of people. And in those incidents, I would feel a bit of an imposter. Or in incidents where I'd be brought in to do something and I wouldn't have a kind of clear idea of what my job was. So that part of that is again, coming back to the quitting alcohol thing for a year. Recognize the situations where you feel socially anxious and uncomfortable. And one of the things you got to ask yourself is, should you be putting yourself in those situations? Like, I don't like nightclubs if I'm sober. So why do I decide to go to a nightclub? And, I'm going to be drinking for the rest of my life. If I decide to go to nightclubs for the rest of my life, it would make more sense to get out of the nightclub. But the same is true of like other incidents of imposter syndrome. There's places, if you put me around models for the rest of my life, I'm probably going to feel imposter syndrome again because that's not where I want to be. So that's probably part of it as well. Are you putting yourself in positions where that's not you? I think that might be just thinking out loud.
No. Well, it's true though, isn't it? Environment's everything. It influences everything. People, surroundings, the works.
Yeah. I wonder, do we put ourselves sometimes in places where, again, it's kind of unconscious, isn't it? It's just not thinking about, like, I had to stop myself with that. I was like, why do I drink on nights out? And it's like, well, I'm not comfortable. Why am I not comfortable? I don't know the people I'm with. I can't really talk to the people I'm with. The music's really loud. I don't like dancing when I'm sober. There's a lot of factors here. And so it was like, right, do you keep putting yourself in that position or do you just change the environment? And, environment always beats willpower.
I think especially as well when you've got because obviously when we went on the night out in Galway, two things. One, absolutely inspiring the amount of people that came up to you and saying how much you'd helped them, like in their life. That was absolutely phenomenal. But I think as well when you've got the social media persona of a fitness guy as well, it's like the two worlds collide, doesn't it? It's like, you didn't see me.
He's an interesting one with. I was a friend of mine. I was listening to a podcast he was on recently. He was talking about this and he was saying, I'm trying to think how he phrased it. If someone sees a speaker on stage, they're seeing that person possibly at their best. So, like, if someone comes to my seminar and I'm having a good day, that might be them seeing me. That might be them seeing me at my best. And they could see me in the beer tent in Galway. The Christmas beer tent is here. I was there on Monday night. That's probably not me at my best in their eyes. But both of those things are me. I do those two things. But, you see celebrities sometimes maybe, and they buy into what people think they're supposed to be, and it drives them crazy because you can be a lot more than just your job, just your title, just your whatever it is. When you become obsessed by what other people think you should be or whatever it is, you kind of lose yourself a bit. But if you embrace all parts of yourself, not to say I should be in the beer tent, but you know what I mean?
I think that's an amazing topic as well because completely way off topic here, but when you do look up to someone or when you do have someone on the pedestal, you do actually place them as like a superhuman identity, don't you? So it's like they're not doing half the things that I'm currently doing, and it's that whole comparison trait.
Yeah, look, we've never met anyone perfect up to this point. It's even like, say Conor McGregor there. Conor McGregor was a hero for a long time in Ireland, and then all his antics in the last couple of years, a lot of people have gone against him. And a certain amount of it is like, some people are very polarized and everything's black and white. They don't want to look at things through a grey lens or a bit of like, the reality is he's an incredible athlete. His self-belief is amazing. He does a certain amount for charity. There's a lot of good there. And there's also times where he's an idiot. But any of those people judging him, if they were to look at themselves, they're probably like, yeah, sometimes I'm on fire, other times I'm an idiot. And, that's definitely me. Sometimes I have great seminars and I'm on fire. And then I go out and drink too much beer with my brother. So, as long as it's that whole thing, know yourself. You can't become fixated by other people's opinion of you. That's when you go crazy.
Exactly. So with you then, you have picked up two loves, which are very similar to kind of like two things that I enjoy as well. So Muay Thai and obviously getting out there into the great outdoors. obviously you kicked off my love for getting up onto mountains, because it's something that I've never really put myself into a situation until you put your hand out and said, come to Peru. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you take from those? Because we've been in contact now for some years, and just every time your social media pops up, you're either in another country, you're up another mountain. So what do you get from those? Because obviously there's discipline and stuff along the lines of that.
The biggest thing for me is headspace, and I tell this story sometimes in seminars that when I started a couple of years ago, I had five clients, and then a couple of years on, I had 5 staff, and it was like, that's a tiny amount of staff for some people, but for me, it was not what I signed up to. I found it quite overwhelming. I found it a bit stressful. And so I went to climb a mountain out in Russia, and the first couple of days when I had that headspace away from technology, I had this like whisper coming up from inside of me that was saying, simplify your life. And then 5, 6, 7, 8 days in, the whisper is a little bit louder. And by the end of the trip, it was like this shouting roar.
Screaming.
Yeah, simplify your life. And I came back and I let go of most of my staff, and I simplified things, and I changed direction completely. And that's kind of metaphor for, again, if we're very busy, we push down that voice. And when we take on a huge amount of information, we push down that voice. The voice is always there. And it's like on a macro level in life, you'll have the same thing. So you'll have someone that'll have a health scare, a minor health scare. And if they ignore it and don't make changes, then it'll get worse and worse and worse. Eventually they get chronic disease. You'll see people that end up in the same relationships again and again and again and again with the same types of people. It's that expression, whatever you resist will persist. So for me, the mountains definitely give the headspace, the physical challenge. I like seeing the world. I like meeting new people. I like the back to basics approach of it. I mean, you become an adult and you get a mortgage and you get all this stuff, and it's like, it's nice to just go and have a backpack for 2-3 weeks, whatever it is, and to be self-sufficient to a certain degree. It ticks a lot of boxes for me. So yeah, you're probably the same.
Love it. Love it when you get out there as well, and it literally is just the simple life is the happiest life.
Yeah, and there's a lot of connection too. You're sitting around playing cards with people in the evening. You're sharing stories. You get to know new people. It takes a lot of
chasing llamas around Cusco.
yeah, ponchos.
Cool. So, moving on to the Jujutsu, you seem to be flying through the ranks in that, like absolutely flying. What's that taught you? Because obviously there's a lot of discipline and focus.
Yeah, it's funny. I started Jiu-Jitsu when I was a teenager. I did boxing, Thai boxing. I did all that stuff. That's what got me into fitness. And I think when I became an adult, I kind of gave up a lot of that to chase against status and money and wanting to be good enough and all this kind of stuff. And I lost it. And then again, I found myself at 28 with the house and the car and everything I thought I wanted. And I just didn't feel right in myself. And I was still struggling, because when things go bad externally, you can understand why you feel bad. But when everything's there for you, it's not easy then when you don't want to get out of bed for a week. I've struggled with anxiety all my life, but one of the things I talked about earlier was pick a couple of things you really enjoy and do them every day. And so I went back to Jiu-Jitsu at 28, and for me it's like an active meditation. It's physical, it's social, it's part of a club, it's get to travel more. I just love it. And I was talking with a friend of mine recently. We were talking about a midlife crisis, and we were laughing and we were saying sometimes a midlife crisis is probably not a crisis at all. It's you've gotten to a point where you're happy to do what you want to do and you're not afraid. When you're in your 20s, maybe you need to look a certain way, you need to be cool, whatever it is. Same with your teens, but maybe when you get to 30 or 40 or whatever it is, you're like, screw it, I'm just going to do what I want to do. So I think for a lot of people, there's probably some magic in looking to what you did in your teens and seeing, or even younger maybe. And that was one of the things for me, was the jiu-jitsu. Going back to that's been life-changing.
So what's next? What's next for Pat Divilly?
Coaching, I think, is going to be the main thing. Starting a small business group, a small coaching group for 2019. That's wanting to work with people on an ongoing basis. I want to do more coaching. I'm getting asked by a lot of the corporates now to do coaching with their staff, which is exciting too. I enjoy the speaking, but I also enjoy working with people one-to-one. So that's definitely on the radar. And not a lot outside of that. I just want to keep climbing a few mountains, do my jiu-jitsu every day. It's a pretty simple life, but that works for me now. So a bit of time in America next year. Going to try to kick off the speaking a little bit out there. But like I say, bit of jiu-jitsu, few mountains, bit of speaking, bit of coaching, time with good people. I'm happy out.
I've got a question. So the simple life, have you found from actually simplifying and going down that method that although it's got simpler, things not have just got better from the way that it's been with you, but from everything else? Does that make sense?
Say it again.
So, do you know that since you've simplified everything, so think back to younger years when you might have been out there constantly chasing overwhelming anxiety. Yeah. Now that you've simplified that, I presume it's a lot more calming in yourself, a lot more clearer. But have you found that's like, because I'm just seeing huge growth from you at the minute, and it's absolutely inspiring to see. Have you found that it's just impacting everything positively since doing that? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it's funny. I think when you're really busy and when you're trying to be busy and you're in that kind of go stage, I'd almost compare it to like the gym. There's like a saturation point. So you could get a client come to you and be like, I want to change my body inside of 3 months and I want to get the kind of results that you've gotten. And they're not acknowledging the fact that you've been doing it for years and all this other stuff. And so there's a saturation point. They can train maybe 5-6 times a week and they can do everything else, but they can't. Doing more is actually going to do more harm than good. And it's almost like when we get into that accumulation phase of taking on information, wanting to grow, wanting personal development, wanting all this stuff, we want to take on so much. But unfortunately, there's a saturation point. And it's like once you've read the books, you got to do something with what's in the books and you got to learn from life experience. And I think as I've mellowed over the years and I take in less information and I focus on less and I do less and I'm not afraid to be, like people meet me and they're like, "Oh, you must be crazy busy," and I'm like, "No, I'm chilled." Whereas a couple of years ago, I would have been like, "Yeah, I'm so busy. I'm so busy." I was proud of that. Now it's like I know that busyness doesn't get me anywhere, and so I just want to. Yeah, everything's a lot more calm now, which is good.
I always find that when people come up to you like, "Oh, you must be busy," it's like, no, they're just like, "Oh."
Yeah. It takes people back. It takes people back because. It's in my experience, now it's different at different points of your life, I suppose, but in my experience, oftentimes busyness is just a cover for not wanting to address stuff that needs to be addressed. So like when I was busy a couple of years ago, I wasn't seeing my friends and family as much as I should have been seeing them. I wasn't looking after my health. And it was easier to be busy in work than it was to deal with those things. So sometimes it's easy to be busy. Sometimes busy is your excuse. And that'll piss people off, but that's reality.
So, Pat, what I love about your story and your transition with everything is that you literally had to break yourself down in order to rebuild yourself. You realized that clarity was everything in order to create and rebuild yourself back up. And now, mate, to see what you're doing to the world and what you're putting out there is just, it's so inspiring. And the lives that you're helping, you've seen it everywhere. Like, you're a man in demand, so it's absolutely incredible. Now, for a lot of people, especially listeners to this podcast, if there's anyone who's going through that period where there's probably resistance showing up or they know that something needs to change, what would be your advice for that?
One thing I always tell people is that we tend to try to jump from A to Z, and we forget there's a lot of letters in between. So when I think back to the Dublin days, I was trying to get 100 clients into my business before I even had one. And so there was always this massive leap and always this feeling that I wasn't getting anywhere. When I came back to Galway and I started again, I had 5 clients and my goal then was to get to 10 and then it was to get to 20. And so I broke it down and I definitely had a big vision of, I want to get on TV or I want to do books, but you got to blend it between having a vision and then having the small action steps every day. The resistance oftentimes comes from how big a leap you're trying to take. There's that kind of example of, if you commit to going for a 10-minute run, chances are when you put your shoes on, you go outside, you're going to do more than 10 minutes. But by lowering that expectation on yourself, you're giving yourself the best chance to actually show up. Like showing up is half the battle. They say that all the time. I'd be telling people like a great fitness goal, if you're trying to get into fitness, a great fitness goal is to get 20 workouts in the next month. Doesn't matter how long, short, intense, or relaxed those 20 are. It teaches you the discipline of actually putting on your runners, going to the gym, going out for a run or a walk or whatever it is. And you do that enough. Like that was my jiu-jitsu journey over the last 2 years. I knew going into it that I'm obsessive about things. And I knew I was going to want to hit 6 sessions a week. And I knew that if I didn't hit 6, I'd feel like a failure and the wheels would come off the wagon. So I told myself I'm going to get at least 3 a week in. I lowered the expectation. And guess what? If you get 3 done, keep going and maybe you'll get 6 and it's an extra good week. And most weeks I get 6. But if I don't get 6, I'm not beating myself up about it. So I think that's important with the resistance. Resistance often shows up from having this massive expectation, oftentimes which comes from looking at other people's lives. So a bit of compassion for yourself is important.
Playing the comparison game. Love it. And I just want to flip this. So obviously from our initial experience when we went to Peru and you dropped the penny drop moment on myself, I want to just wrap up this podcast by flipping the question back to you. So if you were to go back to your younger self and give yourself one piece of advice for life in general or through everything that you've been through, what would that be?
I've actually got a video on my Instagram somewhere that where I talk about this, and I wrote the letter to my younger self and I said, I was bullied a lot as a kid, and I just told myself, do the things that you enjoy. Being cool is actually embracing all parts of yourself. You don't have to fit into a certain box. Generally, the people that go for you and take it out on you are actually just projecting their own insecurities and stuff like that. And it was funny reading that back a couple of years ago, because that was a time when maybe I had social media trolls, or I had people that would take digs at me, and it would really get to me. I had to develop thicker skin over time. But that's one of the fear of judgment, again, coming back to that, is the biggest thing that holds us back. So tell my 10-year-old self, just do you, and there's no set way to figure things out. You're not supposed to get it right all the time. It's a journey. It's not about certain tick-the-box moments. Just be you really is the big thing.
Brilliant. And Pat, where can people find you? Where do you hang around?
PatDivilly.com is my website, so Divilly, and I'm on Instagram, mainly Instagram I use now, LinkedIn. I'm trying to be a grown-up, so I'm on LinkedIn. My email is support@patdivilly.com, and just check out the website, or check out Instagram's probably the best. I put up daily videos up there, and dude, thanks for having me on. I appreciate everything you're doing as well, and you always inspire me with your vision, and you don't do things in halves. It's good.
You live once, my friend. Pat, just to wrap it up, what does it mean to you to live a nourished life or an upgraded life?
I guess, nourished and you nourish your mind with positive thoughts that support where you're trying to go. You nourish your body with foods and movement that make you feel good. An upgraded life is all about, you don't have to be who you've always been. You can develop. You can be a new person every 3 to 6 months, just by questioning the stories that keep you stuck, checking back in with where you want to go. And really, it's just about embracing all parts of yourself. I'll embrace both Pat that's on fire on stage, but also Pat that goes to the beer tent with his little brother and has too much beer. I'm not going to beat myself up about anything I do. I'm just going to grow and learn every day, maybe drink a little less beer next time.
Pat, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you.